Bonjour, Kiniwea, Ogimakwe, Nandijnakas. Hello, I'm Jeneile. I was a Narch intern this summer as I was completing my PhD in nursing at UW-Milwaukee. So I successfully defended my dissertation on August 7th. So I am now Dr. Jeneile Luebke. I just started a postdoc at UW-Madison, thank you, on August 17th. So I literally had no time to breathe because I jumped right into a couple really big grants at UW-Milwaukee, but they're for a really good reason, collaborating with the Department of Justice, looking at intimate partner violence and sexual violence in the lives of American Indian women. So it aligns with my dissertation topics. So I've been really busy, but it's such important work. So I just want to keep that momentum going and keep going. So yeah.
Wonderful.
So I sent you my are you able to share that, or do I share?
Either way, I can share, or if you have the ability, let me just find it quick and I'll share it in a second.
Okay.
Just a second here.
Easton, turn it down.
Okay, I'm opening it right now. I'll just.
I have my timer set because it's a heavy topic and it's so easy to go off into a tangent. So I've got my timer set here.
Okay.
So for my internship this summer, this supported my ability to analyze the data that I had collected during my 4th year in my program. And so it allowed me the time to analyze my data and findings, and then finish the completion chapters for my dissertation this summer. The title of my dissertation was Intimate Partner Violence and the Lives of Urban Wisconsin American Indian Women, a continuation of colonial justice. And just as a disclaimer, this topic was very near and dear to my heart. I am a violence survivor myself, and so that was the impetus for my dissertation project. The study itself was supported by the Forest County Potawatomi Foundation. Yep, thanks. And I also just wanted to put this out that I dedicated my dissertation study to the memory of Cozy Medicine Top Decora. She was a young Ho-Chunk mother of 3 children, and her life was taken from her by her intimate partner while my study was taking place. Next slide. I can't advance the slides. Okay, so the objectives of my Narch internship this summer was to complete the data analysis from my qualitative transcripts, and I'll explain my study quickly after this. The second objective was to write at least 1 results manuscripts, and I will discuss that. So that was completed, and I submitted that for publication 2 weeks ago. Third objective was submitting a copy of my finalized and edited dissertation to the graduate school, which I successfully did, and that has been published. And then from that point up until now, I have been finishing the analysis of my transcript data, and then I have a few more findings manuscripts that I'm submitting for publication. The purpose of my dissertation study was to gain a better understanding of how intimate partner violence, or IPV, manifests in the lives of urban American Indian women by really centering their voices and their individual lived experiences in the local context. So I focused on urban American Indian women living in the Milwaukee and Green Bay areas. And I chose this topic because there is a crisis of intimate partner violence and sexual assault against American Indian women. Almost 85% of American Indian women in our country have experienced either intimate partner violence, sexual violence, or other types of violence in their lifetime. So we're disproportionately impacted by violence. There's also a gap in the literature. There are no published studies currently about intimate partner violence among American Indian women in Wisconsin. So my publishing these data manuscripts will be a first. So it's a big step to close a gap. And also this is an exemplar of Indigenous feminist activism through a study led by a nurse researcher that is Native, who's also a survivor of intimate partner violence. I'll go through these next slides pretty quickly because it's a lot of, the technicalities of my study, but I used a qualitative design, critical ethnography, and it really sets out to address and challenge racism, colonialism, and oppression to foster social change. It aligns pretty closely with Indigenous approaches to research, really to document and highlight social injustices and promote social justice, and also to help create spaces, safe spaces for the voices of the silenced. I use two theoretical frameworks, two feminist frameworks, post-colonial and Indigenous feminism, and I used these together synergistically to really highlight and better understand the complexities of the socio-political and historical locations of vulnerable populations, and also because it's an activist approach, because it promotes decolonization through highlighting self-sovereignty, self-determination for all Indigenous peoples. And as we know, feminist thought was really coined by Indigenous women. So next slide. These were my research questions that I used to guide my study. Again, they're really focused around just trying to gain a better understanding of that individual lived experience and looking at the impacts of violence on the health and well-being of our women, and also trying to better understand if there's barriers that exist to accessing help. Okay, next. I went through this already, so I really targeted urban American Indian women, and those were my inclusion criteria. Recruiting was a collaborative process, and this is where I really started to gain some relationships with different folks, and there was an overwhelming amount of support for this study. I collaborated with these various agencies in the Milwaukee and Green Bay area, and snowball sampling, which is when I recruited one participant, that participant let friends, family members, etc. know. So they were kind of like internal referrals, which was really crucial for me to be able to complete this study. Okay. I interviewed a total of 34 women between February and May, and that was right as COVID was hitting. And so that caused some issues because I was able to complete only about a third of my interviews in person, and then I had to complete an IRB amendment to be able to do phone and Skype or video interviews. So there's that. I analyzed the data using thematic analysis, and the two themes that I focused on for my dissertation study was structural barriers to help seeking after experiences with intimate partner violence, and COVID was a major player in some of these barriers. And I also found that there was a significant amount of IPV that was experienced during the pregnancy period. These are just a thematic diagram, kind of putting all of the pieces together for my dissertation. Different types of barriers that were experienced, financial, existing barriers to existing resources, whether it was privacy concerns, lack of awareness, and a lack of culturally responsive care, and then the COVID barriers. Next. This is a thematic diagram looking at the pieces for pregnancy-related IPV. The 34 survivors that I interviewed, almost 68% refused or were unable to seek help after experiencing violence, which was very concerning to me. And there were many different reasons, and they're all in the manuscript that I submitted for publication, but various reasons, whether it was transportation, fear of retaliation, but there were quite a few references about tensions with law enforcement. So that was a eye-opening finding for me that requires some intervention. Next. These were some of the voices of the survivors. I feel that these are more powerful than any numbers could tell. They, are the words and the thoughts and the feelings of the survivors, and just highlights how this is a very real and prevalent problem that really deserves more attention and intervention. And next. These are more voices. Many references to shelters or emergency shelters being full, concerns not taken seriously, things like that. Okay, next. About half of the participants reported having a pregnancy, and 69% almost reported having some type of violence, whether it was physical, emotional, or sexual during pregnancy. So again, there were linkages reported to negative pregnancy experience and birth outcomes. So I felt that that was a significant finding that really needs to be explored further. Okay, next. And then the next two slides are voices of the survivors again. How the violence in their lives really impacted them, impacted other children in the home, and the outcomes. Okay, next. Just so to wrap this up, the significance of the findings was that the findings of my study have implications for creating survivor-led interventions to try to reduce barriers and improve support. I really try to focus on the voices of the survivors and what they felt that they needed, what they didn't, what services that they could have used or wanted to use, but they weren't able to, looking at the structural barriers that still exist, and really getting a better understanding of how, excuse me, the COVID pandemic is exacerbating these barriers greatly, and exacerbating the violence, sheltering in place where it isn't safer to be at home. We have sisters out there that are in desperate situations and are not able to get the help that they need. So I feel that this is a critical issue that we need to, keep exploring and have a better understanding so we can reduce some of these barriers and get everyone the help that they need and deserve. So I think the rest, yeah, these were the recommendations that I had in my dissertation. So they're in the slides if you want to look at them. And then I think the last slide is references. I did put a few slides. This was from my dissertation about breaking the cycle in resiliency. Although it seems like it's a lot of doom and gloom. About 76% of the survivors that I did interview are no longer with the abusive partner that they spoke of. So there were several references to how they got out. Some of the women that I interviewed are actually working as advocates for other women now, or they're working or volunteering at shelters. So there were a few that had some quotes that really stuck out to me about, being in a better place, being in a healthier place. I can get out, there's hope. So there's another quote. So that's it. It's a lot to cram in a short period of time, I know. So
you did such a nice job with your dissertation, and this is such an important topic and such a difficult one to address that I'm just so impressed. I don't think we've met. I'm Laura Cassidy. I'm at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and I used to, for 10 years, direct our PhD program in public and community health. So I'm used to dissertations, and this looks like it'll have a huge impact. I do have a student right now, Ronald Anguzu, who is from Uganda, and he's over there now, and his dissertation is focusing on partner violence during pregnancy in women in rural areas there. And if he's ever allowed to leave Uganda again and come back, he might be somebody you'd like to meet, and you guys could share notes together. And but I also wonder, where foundation for this work, and how are you going to build upon it? Are you going to write a K grant or?
Well, we did get a $2 million grant from the Department of Justice that we were awarded in May. That grant takes what I did a step further. So the money does not go to us it's not a research grant. We basically give most of it to our community partners. So we created positions for advocates, Gerald Ignace, Her Wellness, Embrace, St. Croix Sart, Oakwood Haven. So we are funding the salaries of 6 SANE, sexual assault nurse examiner positions, and then advocates to be paired with all of them. And then we're bringing everyone together, and we're meeting on a regular basis and sharing knowledge, and we're trying to kind of break those barriers with the local hospitals to allow Native advocates in the hospital with Native patients. So there's just really focusing on those structural barriers. And then we just applied for an R1 with the Medical College of Wisconsin. There were a few partners. This one is more research-based, but it's BIPOC, so we're looking at the Black community and the Native community and creating an advisory committee. It's focused around COVID and barriers, so we'll have focus groups and just kind of getting a better handle on what are the numbers and how severe is this. So we applied. We don't know if we'll get it.
I think
I'm a co-I on that. I'm not a PI, so I need to start kind of branching out and doing my own work. But I was just appointed to the Wisconsin Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Task Force. And I know there'll be some opportunities within that task force for some research. So I'm hoping I can collaborate with some of the other people and apply for funding and develop my program of research.